to tell people that my journey started in a Head Start classroom because Head Start really started shaping my understanding of equity, of access, of opportunity and potential from the very beginning. I didn't grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to be a chief people officer, right? As a matter of fact, I grew up thinking I was going to be a doctor. But I've always been obsessed with people, how they grow, how they connect, and how they thrive at work. So I've spent over 2 decades in the people space, starting in recruiting, growing into leadership development, and eventually becoming a chief people officer. And I've also had the privilege of working across various industries, from startups where I was absolutely employee number 15 to Fortune 500 companies with thousands of employees. But each experience taught me something different about the human side of business. And throughout that journey, one theme has remained constant. People deserve to work in places where they feel safe, where they feel seen, and where they feel significant, right? People say valued, I say where they feel significant. Because here's the truth, HR is no longer about just compliance and admin. And that's what I thought when I started this journey into the people side of business. But in reality, we are builders of systems, we're shapers of culture, and we're drivers of outcomes. So my whole mission now is to prove that the path to profitability runs through people and not around them. We really want to move the needle. We have to move hearts first. I was thinking that sometimes the biggest challenge isn't what's changing, it's helping people feel safe inside that change. Centralizing HR across business units that had been operating in silos for years. Functionally, yes, it was a restructure, but emotionally, it was a trust shift. And what I found so important as I was going through this process is that we had to win the hearts and minds before we changed any workflows. So it was really important that we start with a clear, values-aligned story, why it mattered, how it supported our mission, and what it would enable for our teams and our employees, right? As we think about being of service to the organization. And then we stayed consistent with communication. We had regular touch points with leaders. We had feedback loops with teams. And, one of our values is open and transparent communication. So we practiced transparency, right? Not as a buzzword, but really being transparent about where we are in this process. And this allowed us to have a very smooth transition. We had really strong alignment, and it really laid the foundation for us to do real strategic work. We really want to move the needle. We have to move hearts first. This transformation, it didn't begin in a spreadsheet. It didn't begin in a project plan. It really began in trust. And I had to make sure that we kept building that trust along the way. When we think about impactful programs and having very little to no budget at all, I think about this peer recognition program we launched at a previous company called Culture in Action. We invited team members to shout out their peers for living our values in real, everyday ways. And this was really important because at that time in the organization, we were rethinking and reimagining the values that applied now, right? When the company started 10 years ago, there was a sort of set of values, but the company had changed. And what were those values that were important to who we are and who we wanted to become right now? And this peer recognition program called Culture in Action, it really, really worked better than I could have imagined. Employees started looking for behaviors, right? They started talking about them. They started celebrating behaviors. And our values came off the wall and they started showing up in Slack, in meetings, in conversations, in Zoom rooms. So it really allowed engagement to increase. It allowed trust to grow. And what was even more important for me is that new hires said that they could feel the culture before they actually step through the door, because it was so important to who we are and our DNA. And it was proof that so much of what we did was built on connection and how we connected to the culture and the organization. How do we make sure that employees know that growth is owned by you? And how do we make sure that performance is anchored in development? When people see that their growth matters, they show up differently. One of the programs that I'm especially proud of is performance. And start really thinking about it like a relationship. We really worked incredibly hard to redesign performance management, right? To create this performance development framework. So how do we make feedback ongoing? How do we make sure that employees know that growth is owned by you? And how do we make sure that performance is anchored in development and not judgment? We aligned every single touch point to one question. How does this help someone grow? Because it was really important for us that our employees feel supported. We want managers to feel confident. And we wanted to make sure that we were a high-performing organization so business results will improve. Because now people were aligned, they were engaged, and they were really clear on not just where they're going, but where we're going as an organization. The biggest lesson that I took away is, if we want our people to care about performance, we have to care about their potential. And when people see that their growth matters, they show up differently and they deliver differently, right? They're committed to helping the business grow. I think we have to change the way we're doing performance management and really focus on performance development. First thing is, CEOs need to understand that your people strategy isn't separate from your business strategy. It is your business strategy. So when I'm talking to executives, it's really important that they don't think about investing in people as soft. I don't know a founder or a CEO who doesn't say they don't care about their people. They do, but I think they have to take that next step. And that next step is, what's the follow through? What is the data and the reality say about investing in people? What are we doing to make sure that we have engaged, empowered teams? How are we driving better retention? I'm a business person, but I specialize in people. So it's really important that CEOs take that people strategy really, really important, because the cost of ignoring it means that they may not have a high performing company. They may not have this high trust culture. So it's really important that they start seeing people not as overhead, but as their most valuable growth engine. So what does that mean? What does that mean about their well-being? What does it mean about performance development, right? What does it mean about coaching? And these are not soft skills, right? These are power skills that organization need to invest in to make sure they're retaining the best and the bright. And it had to be more than just sending messages. It had to make sure that the messages landed. The workforce is being more distributed, more diverse, more dynamic. We've really had to figure out how we're communicating. It had to make sure that the messages landed. So we've started focusing on three things. Clarity. Is the message simple and focused? Connection. Does it feel personal? Does it feel human? Does it feel values driven? Because that means it's part of our culture. And consistency. Are we reinforcing the same messages through different channels? And I think this is where platforms like Change Engine have really made a difference for the organizations that I've worked at. And we use it to deliver smart, timely nudges right where people are, not where we want them to be, right? It allows us to automate this communication without losing authenticity. We can literally build campaigns. I talked about the Culture in Action program, And we utilized Change Engine to build a campaign around values, what that means, what the behaviors look like. So we built this campaign and we did it across the media so that everyone got this message. And if you were a leader, it looked different if you were a member of the staff. So allowing us to automate messaging without losing authenticity. Does this message build trust? Did it inspire action? Did it foster belonging? And I think that's the next frontier. How does it let me know how people feel about what they read?